Water is the key to life, yet millions have no access to this basic human necessity. Imam Hussain Charity is building water wells in Pakistan. Help the survival of many who can't have this basic human right. Those who are at risk of disease and even worse, death. Imam Hussain Charity has a 6-month guarantee of completion of each water well project. Help transform the lives of the believers who live without water. Donate today.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear respected brothers and sisters and dear viewers of Imam Hussain TV, and welcome to this live and exciting Q&A session we have going on here. Now, over the past 25 nights or so, you have been following and you've witnessed probably the most followed show in the Shia world today. Over 1,500 minutes of pure dissection of the topic of Nahj al-Balagha. And I'm so honored to have this Q&A session with none other than Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani. Good evening, wassalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Habibi, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, great to be back together. It's been a while.
It's been a while,
Yeah,
it's been a while.
yeah.
How has Shahr Ramadan been for you?
Yeah, it's been amazing, really inspirational. It's been great to have such amazing feedback worldwide. It's been busy on different levels, as you know, because I think people are maybe a bit sick and tired of seeing me everywhere. But, you know, alhamdulillah, the Shia voice has done absolutely amazing. And we can't wait for the semi-finals beginning from Tuesday.
Tuesday, yep.
And then, you know, the Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam documentary that I released, which has been an unbelievable success. But I think obviously the Nahj al-Balagha series has really been something that has given me unbelievable inspiration. You know, so to see so many people picking up Nahj al-Balagha now, you know, Shia and non-Shia, Muslim and non-Muslim. Whether they are coming from a faith angle or whether they're coming from an angle, for example, of just wanting to pick up a piece of literature, of the many pieces of literature that are there available in libraries around the world, you know, the feedback's been absolutely amazing. So, alhamdulillah, I hope God has accepted the very, very little that has been given back, and credit to the team behind the scenes, you know, be it the hard work of my brother, or for example, Imam Al-Hussain TV, or the community in Birmingham.
Yep.
We'll get to that. We'll get to everybody one by one, but everybody has really put a lot of effort in.
Ahsante. Now, before we get started, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you, if you do want your questions answered, then please send them to the number you'll see down below on your screens. Over the next 5 nights, myself and Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani will be here to answer your questions on the 25 nights that we've had. But Sayyid, I wanted to ask you first, out of all the topics you could have picked, why Nahj al-Balagha?
Yeah, I think all of us growing up, I don't care what level of knowledge you're on, when you hear Nahj al-Balagha, you're just like, Nahj al-Balagha. It's just got this aura around it. But even with that aura around it, I don't think many households actually discuss, you know, this phenomenal piece of literature, which is now, you know, you're looking at 1,000 years old. And when I went online, I was thinking, what piece of literature could I examine this year? In the past, I've done biographies, I've taken certain topics, and I just felt that there was a need to maybe look at a classical text and try and open it up. But Nahj al-Balagha is a very difficult read. There's a lot of people who, if they read Nahj al-Balagha alone, you sometimes stop at like the 5th or 6th sermon for a number of reasons. Sometimes the sermons are so long, Sometimes the sermons are very historical.
Okay.
So if you don't really know your Nahrawans, your Jamals, your Safins, you could be sometimes in absolute no man's land. Sometimes the sermons are vague in relation to who they're talking about. And of course, that's why an exposition or a sharh was always done of Nahj al-Balagha, you know, whether it was Ibn Abil Hadid, or whether you came to Abdul, whether you came to scholars from within our schools who had opened up the Nahj and done a sharh of it. The sharh was needed because it wasn't something that anybody could just do themselves. And so it took me, it was quite hard work, I must admit, to try and do a number of things.
I can only imagine how
hard it was. To try and do a number of things, actually. I think when I know that I'm going to use it for Shahr Ramadan, as you know, in the Shi'i calendar, Shahr Ramadan, the 10th, we look at Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam, the 15th Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, and 19th till 21 Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And so I have to make sure that the sermons I'm picking can relate to those nights. I also have to know my audience. There is a difference between a television audience and an audience in an Imam Barga or a Husayniyah. A television audience, in a way, could be a lot more, I think, more of a dialogue as if you're having with them. Sometimes majlis can fall into monologue. So how do I then present these topics? I need to know the communities that I'm presenting to. And also, how do I have a balance between social topics, theological topics, historical topics, where people, so you might have seen, you know, the one we did on the 12 rules of life, which we compared it to Peterson's books. And, you know, that is something out of the ordinary. You don't really have an analysis normally on 12 rules of life from a particular Shi'i text.
Exactly, yeah.
So, you know, and then looking at issues which sometimes people never imagined were in Nahj al-Balagha. You know, nobody really knew that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam may have been very open about Fatima al-Zahra and her feelings towards her in Nahj al-Balagha, or about Imam Ali alayhi salam speaking openly about, you know, prophets of Allah, or talking about the ant and the peacock and, you know, the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, as you could see, it's a series that sometimes there are certain topics in the series which can be quite difficult to digest. But I think you notice from what I'm talking about, I'm really passionate about it. And I think a discussion concerning something like Nahj al-Balagha, you have to be very intensely passionate about. Because when you know you're doing something for the whole month, and alhamdulillah, I remain the only speaker in the world who continues to stay on one topic for the whole month. There are people who may do 10 on this, 5 on this, 3 on this, 7 on this. So to be able to stick on one topic the whole month, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been so kind to help me hopefully serve the people with it.
Ahsan. Now, I want to talk this pile right here, right in front of me, because people are thinking, it's Sayyid Ammar lost it. Buying Hobbes and Ibn Khaldun and what's this one? Dawkins, and you know, all these books. Why have you bought them over this past month?
Yeah, so, you know, it'd be nice for everyone to see on camera what we have over here. What I've got is some authors who I enjoyed reading their works, even though they may not be household names in our religion. So,
but for example, these books are more famous than Nahj al-Balagha right now.
I think that will come to my next point. But it's very important that, you know, if Marx, Huxley, Dawkins, like you mentioned, Dawkins, if I look over here, Aristotle, you can help me out with the rest. Pass it. What do we have? Confucius, Camus. Who else do we have? We have Hume. Here, who do we have? Nietzsche.
Why do people?
Who else do we have? Plato.
Why are the covers so?
So we've got all of these. Immanuel Kant. So when I've got all of these, what I find with all of these is that the reality is it's always great for a person to be well read about the literature of others. And not just your own literature. In the same way, it's good to travel to other countries and not stick in your own country. because you learn about other people's heritage and other people's history. The second thing, like you mentioned, these authors today are more famous than Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam.
Whose
Whether
fault
you
do you
like it or
think
you
that
don't.
is?
Huh?
Whose fault do you think that is? That Imam Ali, such a great leader, such a great imam, such a great human being overall, is not a household name for the majority of people in the world.
Yeah, I think there's different reasons for it. I think the structure of learning within the Shia world, you know, comparative philosophy or comparative thought is not something which is seen as a fundamental topic. To see what Christian theology says or what, for example, Greek philosophy says, it may have been at a certain point. There may have been interaction between us and other religions or other philosophical opinions at a certain point where there may have been scholars who are ready to look at, for example, you know, I remember one only looks at Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, may Allah bless his soul, who was somebody who was ready to look at the works of these people when Iraq was going through communism. Now, he's a marja, and he's a specialist in principles of jurisprudence or usul, you know, fiqh and so on. And people until today, if you ask them at the Hawza, what would you study of Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr? They'll say to you, we study the halaqat of Sadr. But at the same time, falsafatuna, for example, or iqtisaduna, the whole intention was that there is a Shiyu'iyya rising where? Where? In Najaf and Karbala.
Yep.
There were people who were reading Marx, they were reading Engels, they were reading the works of the dialectic school. And when they were reading all of these philosophical discussions, if you were a scholar who was purely focusing on fiqh issues, how were you going to answer their questions about, or existentialist questions concerning what is the meaning of life?
So he would do it to be able to answer.
So someone like him, why his books became important in Iraq and outside of Iraq. There are people who are not Shia in Jordan who studied him. There are people who are not Shia in Kuwait who studied him. There are universities until today that study our philosophy and our economy. Why? Because a man was ready to tackle contemporary thought and the way it's related to his school. So when I look at, for example, Hitchens, or I look at Dawkins, or I look at Harris, or I look at Dennett, it's not because I believe that atheism is my worldview.
Sure.
But I want to look at what are my people discussing or watching on YouTube at the moment, and I want to be aware of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Today I got a phone call from somebody who said to me that his son, a Muslim, has been affected by Christian thought. We know that in the Usul al-Din, at the end of the day, you're going to have to find your tawheed, you're going to have to find your nubuwwah, you're going to have to find your understanding of life. But how many of us have really and truly studied the Bible enough for us to be able to discuss these things? It's all good saying the Bible has been tampered with. But if an 18-year-old or 20-year-old or 30-year-old said to you, I think the Injil is the same Injil that came, how would you disprove him? What's your tools for disproving him?
Easiest cop-out is to say it's been changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless I'm aware of literature or biblical literature.
Yeah.
And I can go and study biblical literature. I can study literature of other philosophies in order that I'm able to understand what people are reading at the moment. So that's the reason I was able to do this, that I was able to bring my collection with cameras go over here.
Yeah.
And this is just a little bit of the collection that we have. I don't know if the cameramen are fasting or if they're awake or not, but it would be helpful if they are awake just before the fasting ends and are able to help us out by focusing on the books over here. But you'll see that these books over here that we have, these books very clearly are the ones that we need. But don't worry, cameraman, you take your time, have your break, we'll continue with the discussion.
Sayyid Ammar, please next time get a cover that has the author at the bottom, because I've been looking everywhere for the author, I still can't find it.
Imagine it, I thought you were a dentistry student.
Now, Sayyid Ammar, first 10 days of Muharram, you are in Imam Hussein TV. Then the next...
First 10 days of Shahr Ramadan,
Muharram. Shahr Ramadan, you know I'm hungry.
Yeah.
First 10 days of Shahr Ramadan, you're in Aish TV. Second 10 days of Shahr Ramadan, you're in Birmingham. On Imam Hussein TV, you've got Nahj al-Balagha. In Birmingham, you have to memorize the sermon. How was that hard for you to memorize all these sermons and?
Yeah, for sure. The sermons in Nahj al-Balagha are not easy to memorize at all. The sermons in Nahj al-Balagha are extremely difficult to memorize. And look, I can also go up there on the minbar in Birmingham and just read from Nahj al-Balagha and then begin. But I do believe hard work pays off, and I believe there is a difference when a person memorizes and quotes rather than a person who has their iPad in front of them or their notes in front of them, which is not a negative, but I believe that we should be a community where it's not amazing that someone has memorized the sermons of Nahj al-Balagha. It should be natural, it should be normal. It's only now that we've reached a stage where, wow, this person has memorized all the sermons of Nahj al-Balagha, when really we should be a community which is very accustomed to the Nahj. Yep.
Now, brothers and sisters, you've got the reason why Sayyid Ammar has done Nahj al-Balagha this Shahr Ramadan. If you do want to send in your questions, the number will be down below, and we are here for the next 5 nights of taking your questions and for the Sayyid to answer them. Now, Sayyid, straight into the questions. This person says, Assalamu alaikum Sayyid Ammar. In Sermon 206, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I dislike you starting to abuse them, but if you describe their deeds and recount their situations, that would be a better mode of speaking and a more convincing way of arguing. Instead of abusing them, you should say, Oh Allah, save our blood, and their blood produce reconciliation between us and them, and lead them out of their misguidance, so that he who is ignorant of the truth may know it, and he who inclines towards rebellion and revolt may turn away from it. The questioner asks, why do the Shia abuse personalities like Muawiyah when Nahj al-Balagha sermons of Imam Ali alayhi salam says he dislikes for us to do so?
Yeah, that sermon is a sermon that was given at the Battle of Siffin. And what happened was that at the battle, Hujr bin Adi was amongst the group of people who began to abuse the people of Sham.
Generalizing?
Generalizing.
Okay.
Not Muawiyah in specific.
Okay.
When this happened, when Imam Ali alayhi salam said, I do not like you to be of those who abuse, of course, the word is sab.
Sab, okay.
That the Imam is saying that I do not like you to be of those who perform sab. When he's saying this, he's saying to his companions that with your abuse of the people of Sham, this is a generalization on all the people.
Okay.
You may find some people today who are of those who abuse, for example, Kufa. Whenever they hear someone from Kufa, they say, Ahl al-Kufa, Ahl al-Fulan wal-Fulan, Ahl al-So and so. Yeah, but all the people of Kufa are not to be put in the same category.
True.
Because some of the greatest companions of the Imams of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam were from Kufa. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam's Khilafah was in Kufa. Imam al-Hujjah, Ajjal Allah Farajahu al-Sharif, where will his center be? Kufa. If a person now today says Kufans in, for example, a lecture or a Noha or a Latmiya, we have to be specific that we don't generalize on a whole area. Here, Imam Ali alayhi salam, it has nothing to do with I don't want you to abuse Muawiyah. It is I don't want you to be of those who abuse. Abuse who? Abuse Ahl al-Sham as the whole of the people of Syria. Or the whole of the people of that Syria or the countries that had become Bilad al-Sham, including, let's say, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. Yes, the Quran, of course, gives us some principles where the Quran may say something like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَا تَسُبُّ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Do not abuse the idols of the idol worshippers, otherwise they'll turn around and abuse yours. Seb, generally speaking, generally, is not something which is meritorious amongst human beings. Forget Islam. Amongst human beings, abusive language is not something meritorious, generally speaking. You might find the odd hadith within Shia literature where people of bid'ah, for example, you may find some who will quote traditions which say increase your sab of Ahl al-Bid'ah, for example, or the people of Bid'ah.
Yeah.
Abuse them to make clear to the people that these are people of Bid'ah, stay away from them. But we find that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, never were they known to be people of sab, nor do they like that their companions are. That, of course, does not mean that amongst the companions there were not companions who abused one another. One only has to look at when you see traditions such as La tasubbu ashabi, do not abuse my companions from the Prophet, peace be upon his family. Many don't mention that this was because of a major skirmish between Khalid ibn al-Walid and Abd al-Rahman bin Auf.
Oh.
Many also forget that Muawiyah used to be of those who instituted public abuse of Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Yep.
And this is admitted by non-Shia. I don't think there's non-Shia out there who want to show that Muawiyah and Imam Ali alayhi salam was best friends. There clearly was abuse happening in the pulpits of Kufa, the pulpits of Basra, the pulpits of Damascus against Imam Ali alayhi salam. And abuse, by the way. When someone says, you Shia abuse, so am I the one who you abuse by calling me Rafidi? You mock me by calling me Rafidi. Even for us, it's not a mock, it's not derogatory, but in your language, if you're against the Shia,
you
say...
mean it as a derogatory...
To the extent that films in Egypt, for a long time, if the film used to mock someone or someone used to abuse someone, they used to say, Yabna al-Rafidi. Yabna al-Rafidi. And Yabna al-Rafidi means that I'm abusing you, but like you're like a Shi'i.
Wow.
And that abuse, of course, continues. Where you look online today and you see the Shia sons of Mut'ah.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see people saying Shia, they are the ones who are this and that. That abuse continues. So when a person wants to quote this from Nahj al-Balagha, for us, yes, we very clearly dissociate from Muawiyah. And very openly dissociate from Muawiyah and from Yazid. We have no qualms about that. We also have companions who dissociated from Muawiyah, like Ammar bin Yasir, who died because of Muawiyah's army at Siffin. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa had said that Ammar will be killed by the rebellious group, a group of infidels. That's our worldview. You want to agree with it, you don't want to agree with it, that's completely up to you. But our worldview is that. So yeah, when someone says that, look, Imam Ali says in this sermon that I don't want you to be of the people of abuse, this is abuse on a general level that I'll abuse the whole area.
Ahsant. Now, when I was picking out the questions, this next one was very interesting to me because it says, may Allah reward such and such man. This is Sermon 227, by the way. May Allah reward such and such man who straightened the curve, cured the disease, abandoned mischief, and established the sunnah. He departed from this world with untarnished clothes and little shortcomings. He achieved good of this world and remained safe from its evils. He offered Allah's obedience and feared Him as he deserved. He went away and left the people in dividing ways wherein the misled cannot obtain guidance and the guided cannot attain certainty. And the question is this sermon about Umar, the second caliph?
Well, there are some who try and attribute this sermon to being about the second caliph. And I've seen arguments that are posited that this sermon is about him. But the reality is that this would contradict another famous sermon in Nahj al-Balagha, which is the sermon known as Shaqshaqiyya.
Yeah.
Shaqshaqiyya, if you look at the sermon you just quoted, which in some is 227, I think, or 226 sometimes in other editions, this one talks about someone who revived the sunnah.
Okay.
In Shaqshaqiyya, Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he talks about Umar's reign, he says that is when you saw a period of wretchedness, wickedness, deviation come. So how could in one sermon you're saying that he's reviving the sunnah, and then in a sermon you're saying that this is what happened in Umar's reign. Imam is very open in that sermon about what he believed happened during Umar's time. And I think when you look during Umar's caliphate, you'll see that even Sunni scholars admit that there were a number of innovations that were done during Umar's caliphate, which were innovations, meaning that they were not necessarily practices of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family.
Sure.
Now, whether a person believes that that is Umar's ijtihad, And Umar was the leader of the community at the time, and therefore he's the one who could, for example, have such innovations. That is something that we differ with. And one of the examples can be seen in Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam's discussion on Salat al-Taraweeh in al-Kafi.
Sure.
Many times people ask the question, why did Imam Ali not stop Taraweeh? In al-Kafi, Imam Ali alayhi salam says that when we wanted to stop it, they were saying he's changing the sunnah of Umar. So therefore, how could Imam Ali alayhi salam, if this is about Umar, how could Imam Ali say, may God be pleased with someone who revived the sunnah, when Imam Ali alayhi salam is against the practice of Taraweeh according to us in Shia circles? As you know, for us in the Shia world, we do not pray Taraweeh. We are very open about the fact that we don't pray it. We believe that 1,000, rak'ah of prayer in the month of Ramadan is something recommended. You see, when you want to understand Taraweeh, I want to make you understand Taraweeh between Salat al-Layl and between 1,000 rak'ah, which is recommended. Salat al-Layl, of course, when the Prophet is praying Salat al-Layl, something obligatory on him, but it is not something which is meant to be then prayed in jama'ah with the rest of the people.
So our issue is jama'ah, right?
Our issue is that you could pray 1,000, and it's recommended to pray 1,000 units of prayer in the month of Ramadan, but you do it individual. You can say it as the nawafil, for example.
Okay.
But to do it in jama'ah for us was Umar's innovation. And you cannot deny that in Sunni literature, there are discussions as to Umar ibn al-Khattab innovating Taraweeh. Now, a Sunni may come to a different conclusion as to what those hadiths mean and which ones are authentic. But for us as Shia, when Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying that we wanted to stop Taraweeh, the Imam was making it clear that this is not of our practices. So someone then asked the question that who could this be about? I think one of the opinions is that possibly this is about Malik al-Ashtar,
Nice.
Malik ibn al-Harith. So these are opinions that are positive.
Would you say Shaqshaqiyya is like our reference point when it comes to Nahj al-Balagha?
I think Shaqshaqiyya is so vital that non-Shia won't accept Nahj al-Balagha because
of Shaqshaqiyya?
Some non-Shia, because we mentioned Ibn Abi al-Hadid and we mentioned Sheikh Muhammad Abdu, but some non-Shia will not accept because Shaqshaqiyya for them is a major problem, because it shows that there could have been major issues, and that you always go back to there where Imam begins to talk about his position in relation to it. Now, there are other letters that can be found in other forms of Shia literature where the Imam discusses with his companions after the Battle of Nahrawan everything that happened since Saqifa. And he's very open about his feelings towards the Caliph. So let's not get twisted that it's only in Shaqshaqiyya that the Imam says this and not anywhere else. We can look at other areas of Shia literature where Imam has been open about his feelings as well.
Now, Sayyid, this next question comes from Fadl in Tanzania. He says, how can Sharif al-Radi narrate from Imam Ali alayhi salam, who lived in the 1st century while he himself died in the 14th century, without mentioning sources or any chains of transmission? Because for us, a big issue that people come out with is there's no chain of narrations. How do you know it's authentic? What's its authenticity?
Just repeat the centuries again, sorry.
So
I just want to make sure he got the dates right.
So Fadl says, Imam Ali, who lived in the 1st century.
Lived in the 1st century.
And Sharif al-Radi died in the 14th century.
14th or 4th?
14th.
Right, no, Sharif al-Radi did not die in the 14th century. Sharif al-Radi died a few hundred years after Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Okay.
So he's saying that how could Sharif al-Radi get things from Imam Ali alayhi salam if he lived a few hundred years later? That's what he's saying, correct?
Sure.
Oh, I can answer this in many ways.
Let's hear
First
one way.
ways is how, if that is the criteria, then how do Bukhari and Muslim get traditions about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi when they lived 200 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi died?
Well, they will claim that they've got a chain of narrators.
Alhamdulillah. And therefore, when we come to Sharif al-Radi and Sharif al-Murtada, we come to a household that is full of knowledge of the literature of Ahl al-Bayt.
Okay.
You see, I'm going to put a disclaimer before I continue with my answer.
Okay.
Sharif al-Radi, firstly, when he's compiling Nahj al-Balagha, he's compiling that which he believes are the most eloquent sermons of Imam Ali alayhi salam. sermons that have been attributed to him. So we're not talking straight away a book like Al-Kafi. We're talking a book more on literature and eloquence. That's number one.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that what he quotes cannot be found in other books that have preceded Nahj al-Balagha.
Sure.
When we have books like Al-Kafi, Shaykh al-Kulayni will use what is at his disposal, going all the way back to whatever was available from Shia literature. Why? Shia literature, one may argue, can be found to be amongst the earliest literature in Islamic history.
Sure.
When we look very early in Islamic history, we find whether it's from Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam and what he left behind, or whether even a questionable work like Kitab Sulaym bin Qais al-Hilali, nobody can deny that it's still a reflection of an early Shi'i community.
Okay.
We then have other works which are discussed, such as the Kitab of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which the likes of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam quote from. We have maqatil literature very early on, which are used as a base for later works of history. So for example, as you know, the famous maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf, Lut ibn Yahya, Abu Mikhnaf, is used as a source for later texts when they want to discuss Waqi'at al-Taf and they want to discuss Karbala. That means that at the disposal of those who are writing years later, whether it is Kulayni or Tabari, or whether it is any other of the authors, they have amongst them even fragments of the Usul al-Arba'mi'ah of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. They may also come back to a work, for example, let's say like the Mahasin of Barqi or Basa'ir al-Darajat of al-Saffar. What I have therefore from the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam until the time of Sharif al-Radi is at the disposal of Sharif al-Radi is Sunni and Shia literature. Remember, there are certain things which Shia believe in that can be found in Sunni works.
True.
And we know that 100 or so years after the Prophet died, you have the Muwatta of Malik, for example. And you still had Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham with certain parts of their works that may have been passed on to be used by Tabari, by Ibn Sa'ad, later by, for example, al-Baladhri, amongst others. We have these works such as the Musannafs, which are available for people to use, whether it's Ibn Abi Shayba or San'ani. So, Sharif al-Radi has a lot at his disposal. I am not saying Nahj al-Balagha is 100% like the Quran.
True.
Nahj al-Balagha, there are areas which a person may be willing to look at and say, is the whole of this sermon attributed to Imam Ali? Is this part questionable? Is that part? But that doesn't mean that a person can say that because Sharif al-Radi lived a few hundred years after Imam Ali, how could you then trust Sharif al-Radi? We have sometimes, even in our books of hadith, sometimes we have discussions, and on my platform on SayyidAmmar.com, subscribers will be privy to these discussions in the forthcoming month, where we will open up books of Shia hadith, and anybody who is on that platform can join me in discussions about hadith world. When a person wants to look at this area, sometimes even Shaykh al-Kulayni, Shaykh al-Saduq, Shaykh al-Tusi, there might be a certain hadith, I don't see the isnad of it when they quote it. Someone will say, you see, there's no isnad. Because maybe he's given the isnad of that hadith in the previous hadith he's quoted, doesn't need to give it again.
Sure.
So, it's not for anyone to just come and say, oh, if someone is living in the 3rd century, how could they know about someone's life in the 1st century? The same way Bukhari and Muslim have an isnad going back 200 years, because the difference is 200 years between them and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa in terms of compilation of their texts. Likewise with us, we have isnads that go back towards the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam.
So when you say, for example, that there's some parts of Nahj al-Balagha that can be found in other Shia literature, do you mean fragments of sermons, or do you mean, for example...
No, sometimes whole sermons.
Whole sermons can be found.
Whole sermons can be found. I could go to Al-Kafi again. I could go to the Imam Ali of a Mufid or a Saduq, you know. I could go to other areas like the Faqih, for example. And I can find sermons in those works as well.
Ahsan. Now, this question comes from the UK. The brother says, Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid Ammar, I'd like to remain anonymous. If if the said sermon, this was about last night's sermon, about the women. If the said sermon which stereotypes women is based upon Aisha's behavior, then why is there not a similar sermon about men based on Muawiyah's behavior? Based on that, he could have said that all men are power hungry, cheats, lack honor, and a male can never be trusted.
Sure. I think, on the first level, there's a lot of sermons that do rebuke men on a general level in Nahj al-Balagha and on a particular level. So in Nahj al-Balagha, you may find on a particular level the discussion concerning the caliphs, including Muawiyah. Then on a general level, when Imam talks about the hypocritical nature of a certain section of people, that could be very general. Imam even rebukes people about when he talks about some men and their love for dunya. Imam sometimes rebukes some men and their love for the wealth and riches of this world, the arrogance of others. I think here in the sermon on woman, when we said that one school said that this is about Aisha, I think Imam particularly looks at what the Quran says about some of the biology and the social roles of females, and then is really saying that because of that, if all my other arguments for me or against her are not enough, then I'm going to make the general statement to all of you that you all know that women in the community, that there is this issue concerning worship, there is this issue concerning witnessing, there is this issue concerning maintenance. How then, in that situation, knowing all of this, does it make a difference because she's the wife of the Prophet that she gets away with all these things and everybody else is subject to them? Again, that is what you see, and that's why you'll see that there's a difference of opinion when it comes to these things. As I said, there's a school that came forward and said, we don't believe that's the sermon of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And they were saying that because, well, why is Imam Ali talking about general issues if he's only talking about Aisha? But I do believe that Imam becomes general. In another sermon, he's very particular about Aisha being the rider of the quadruped. But I believe that Imam becomes very general when he feels that even if you want to praise her or believe her position is the highest as an army, you cannot deny that generally speaking, there is a law for women instituted in the Quran that will always mean that even prophets of Allah who are not female. That is a way of looking at it. Again, the back and forth can continue.
Back and forth can always continue. Now, this next question comes from, it's either Shaima or Shaima. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. From Norway. She says, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, according to what is in Nahj al-Balagha, when addressing Talha and Zubair, may Allah be pleased with them all. By Allah, I had no desire for leadership, i.e. Khilafah, nor any interest in assuming authority, but you yourselves invited me to it and prepared me for it. Sermon 205. Question now is, how then does Shia claim his appointment is divine from God when he doesn't think so himself?
I think the answer is very simple. And that is, I don't want this caliphate that was instituted at an election called Saqifa. And it's not something that I'm chasing, considering I'm already the Imam chosen at Ghadir. I'm already Imam. I don't need you to come and vote for me. Because what happened was, after Uthman died, is all of a sudden, 25 years after they should have listened to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, everybody came rushing to Imam Ali alayhi salam, would you become our leader? And that's where Imam looked at them, and it's as if Imam knew a few things. Number one, I'm already Imam from Ghadir. Number two, this Khilafah you created. We never created this Khilafah. We always believe that the appointment is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam doesn't believe a leader gets elected.
Yeah, of course.
Who is a person who's chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number three, and most important, is that Imam also knew, give it to someone else, because you won't handle my judgments and my decisions.
Do you think he looked at it and said, 25 years have already gone down the drain, What if another one?
No, he makes clear that, look, the only reason I would ever accept this leadership is to bring justice. That's it.
Because he saw justice was gone.
Yeah, he saw that, especially in Uthman's period, how people like Marwan ibn al-Hakam and Samara bin Jundub and Walid bin Uqba were all getting prime positions, left a lot of people baffled. And I think that when a person says, well, if Imam Ali is Imam, how comes when they want to make him Khalifa, he's like, no, he's saying, don't give me that Khilafah that you elected in Saqifa. You people chose this in Saqifa, and when you chose this in Saqifa, you innovated a form of leadership that had nothing to do with divine appointment. Did not the Prophet say, Ali, you are to me like Aaron was to Moses?
Yep.
Did not the Prophet say at Mubahala that Ali is the nafs according to the Quran of the Rasul? All of these, did not the Prophet mention the wilayah of Imam Ali alayhi salam and ad-da'wat al-ashira, that he is his Khalifa and wasi after him? That leadership Imam had already obtained. The people lost on Ali. Ali did not lose. The people lost out.
Yeah.
That's why we believe in a hadith that says Imam Ali is like the Kaaba. You go to him.
I was just going to mention
he
that.
doesn't come to you.
Yep.
So when people try and throw these lines, I know there's always examples, because he's talking about being fourth Khalifa in a system instituted at Saqifa. That's when he would always say, keep that to yourself. You knew what the system of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was.
Ahsant. Next question from brother Ghulam Abbas in Pakistan says, Imam Ali alayhi salam advises Umar according to your lecture on Persia, Sermon 146 in Nahj al-Balagha. If they had the issue that Shias claim, then how could he advise someone who usurped his rights and his wives?
I don't see a problem that Imam Ali alayhi salam, his ultimate vision was the protection of the religion of Islam and the protection of the Muslim world. Therefore, even when Abu Sufyan came to Imam Ali alayhi salam after Saqifa, Abu Sufyan had blatantly come and said, listen, I'll give you whatever you want. I've got soldiers ready. Let's go and fight those who have become leaders at Saqifa. Imam Ali, if he had chased leadership and chased that I have to be number one, he would have used that to fight. But to Imam Ali alayhi salam, Abu Sufyan wants to break the religion. I'm not going to allow him to use me to break it. When these khulafa have become caliphs, at the end of the day, whether you like it or you don't, they are seen as the symbol of the religion at that moment. When they are seen as the symbol of the religion at that moment, what that therefore means is that when they come and ask for advice about the religion, about the future of the religion, then I have to be there to advise them. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam, it's not just in Persia, even on the issue of Byzantine. Byzantine and Persia, Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he wants to go towards these territories who are clearly a threat for the religion at that stage, you find that Imam Ali alayhi salam is very clear. Imam Ali alayhi salam at that stage advises him, this is what you have to do to look after the interest of the Muslims from another group. Now today, for example, I'm the leader of a community. I believe that when you removed me from being leader of the mosque and you came in as president, you done it corruptly. 2 years later, when you come and ask me about the architecture of the mosque, or you ask me about expanding the mosque, I could either say to you, no, you took my leadership, or I could say to you, for the bigger goal for this mosque, and that there are people within this mosque who we need to make sure that they're guided for a better future, I'll tell you about the planning permission that we had for this mosque and about the architects that we used. Who would be a bigger person? Me holding on to something and saying, don't talk to me ever again, or me saying that, listen, this is what I would advise you to do. And that's what he advises him on the issue of Persia. To say that Imam Ali alayhi salam, because he advises someone, that means that Imam Ali is best mates with them, is not something that we necessarily believe in.
But you know what you just said there about the mosque and its architecture and that kind of stuff. Now, I would have kind of people look at it and say, you're just putting on a humble act to win people's sympathy. What would you say to that?
Well, you know what? I don't think anyone can doubt Imam Ali's niyyah Imam Ali, if he wanted positions, alayhi salam,
Sure.
he could have had the best positions in 25 years from Saqifa until he became Khalifa. Imam Ali did not take one position under the government of the first three caliphs.
Was he offered?
In terms of being offered, there's even question marks about offering position.
Okay.
Clearly, they knew that there was an issue of tension. Even in Sahih Muslim, there is a discussion between Umar ibn al-Khattab and Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, peace be upon his family, where Umar makes it clear that, Abbas, you and Ali, you clearly viewed the first caliph as a person who was deceiving, who was a liar, and so on and so forth. There was a tension clearly over the issue of Fadak. There was a tension that clearly had emerged over a number of other issues. So when Imam Ali advises someone, doesn't mean that we forget. It rather means that we're willing to move forward for the religion. And that's why Umar would always say, if it wasn't for Ali, I would be perished. Or don't let there be a situation. And that is the greatness of Imam Ali alayhi salam until today. That when we look at Imam Ali alayhi salam until today, what's amazing, every Muslim on earth admires Imam Ali alayhi salam. Every Muslim on earth. You're Sunni, you're Shia, you all admire Imam Ali alayhi salam. Even though you'll find that there are others in the Islamic world who people have question marks about their behavior. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, every Muslim, come to any Shia, come to all the Sunni world, and they'll all admire or say, we love Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Ahsan. Now, next question says, Assalamu alaikum from Switzerland. I'd like to remain anonymous. In letter 6, Sharif al-Radi included in his Nahj what Imam Ali alayhi salam wrote to Muawiyah. He says, verily those who swore allegiance to Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman have sworn allegiance to me on the same basis on which they swore allegiance to them. Surely this proves his approval of the first three.
No, I think it comes back to what I had answered earlier. And that is, those who pledged allegiance to the caliphs before me are pledging allegiance to me on the same basis. Meaning that you, Muawiyah, if you approve of those and the way they came in before, how comes with me you have an issue? Because what happens, this very important point, what begins to happen is, when Imam Ali alayhi salam becomes Khalifa, Muawiyah will not pledge allegiance to Imam Ali. Now question, Muawiyah, you praise Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman on the basis of the way they were chosen. Aslan, Imam Ali has more right of leadership. The first caliph was chosen in election and the electorate were all not present. There was only a handful of the Ansar and some of the Muhajirun. In terms of Umar, Umar was appointed by the first caliph. Uthman was appointed by 6. Now, Imam Ali alayhi salam saying, I have received people's pledge on the basis of what? On the basis of what's been done before. This has been done before. So what's your issue not pledging allegiance to me? Because you know what Muawiyah was saying. Muawiyah was saying, you are one of those responsible for the killing of Uthman. And there is a letter also, I think letter 28 in Nahj al-Balagha, where Imam Ali begins to rebuke Muawiyah. You're telling us about who is right, who's wrong, who's Muslim, who's not, who's on haqq, who's on batil. You got to read, if there's a letter in Nahj al-Balagha, I advise you all at home to read letter 28 of Nahj al-Balagha. Imam Ali virtually terrorizes Muawiyah's whole history. Okay? Imam Ali was very open in his lectures. He did not necessarily believe in having to censor his material. If you have a problem with it, he was saying very clearly, Muawiyah should be out of Sham and Ibn Abbas should become the governor of Sham. So really all he's doing is he's using your polemic. He is using your point by saying that this is the way they've been appointed. Okay, I've been appointed that way. Why then are there people fighting me? If they approve of the other caliphs, why then do they find it normal to fight the fourth, but it's not okay to fight the first and have Ridda wars and people beheaded?
Yeah. Inshallah, Yawm al-Qiyamah, that question gets answered. This next question says, it's written in one of the commentaries of Nahj al-Balagha, when Uthman was besieged in his own house, Ali stood and defended him with his hands and words. Does this not highlight Imam Ali's respect for Uthman?
Firstly, commentaries of Nahj al-Balagha are not something we are subject to. The commentary can be given by someone whose madhab is completely different to mine. But I don't think that denies the fact that Imam Ali alayhi salam, what he saw happen with Uthman, he saw a major major fitna between the Muslims at that time. Uthman was definitely to blame. You could see that there were a number of companions from Abdullah bin Mas'ud to Ammar bin Yasir to Abu Dharr al-Ghafari who were very open and outspoken against Uthman, and even Talha, Zubair and Aisha were open, which is ironic later on when they fight Imam Ali alayhi salam over this issue. But even Talha, Zubair and Aisha were very open against Uthman's appointment of his Umayyad comrades. No Muslim can deny this. I remember Sayyid Muhammad Qutb in his book Social Justice in Islam, even he's very open about question marks concerning Uthman's decisions as Khalifa that eventually led to his killing. But Imam Ali did not want to see Muslims take it upon themselves, stabbing, killing, fighting. That is something that Imam Ali alayhi salam never wanted. Imam Ali alayhi salam, even when people came to fight him in Jamal or Siffin, he tried his hardest that we don't shoot the first arrow. We are not the first to kill. We are not the first to attack. So therefore, when you look at Imam Ali alayhi salam, when we see him, what do we find? We find that Imam Ali alayhi salam is very clear that let's try our hardest as Muslims in that period to find a resolution. No, you haven't found a resolution. And you know Adi bin Hatim, you know Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, therefore you must be one of the people involved, therefore we will kill you. And that's why when Imam Ali alayhi salam was asked, how comes in your time there are wars? And in the time of the caliphs there isn't. He said, in their time they dealt with people like me. And in my time, I deal with people like you.
Ahsant, Sayyid Ammar, thank you so much for taking the time out to answer these questions.
God bless, thank you.
Brothers and sisters, there is still time for you to have your questions answered. Send your questions to the number down below out on WhatsApp, and inshallah we will get through to them. Please bear with us, there are hundreds of questions coming in, and we're trying our best to pick the most relevant ones and the best ones and the ones which are asked most commonly. But Sayyid, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, Habib.
Over the next 4 nights, we'll be with you live here on Imam Hussein TV. From me, the Sayyid, and the team here at Imam Hussein TV, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But from me and the team here at Imam Hussein TV, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Now, a lot goes into producing the shows that you love here on Imam Hussein TV. Maybe half an hour for you, but it's hours for us. We have many factors to consider when producing our shows. Time, cost, set design, sourcing speakers and guests. It takes us about an hour to film, 3 hours to edit, 2 hours to render, and you watch it in 30 to 40 minutes. Hours just for 30 minutes. What is the I Am Husseini show? Well, it's a show that provides you, the dear viewers, a gateway, a window, a pathway, whatever you want to call it, to visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam at the comfort of your own home.
I am a host at Ahkam SOS. It is a show which entails with people sending in the Ahkam questions which me and Sheikh Ali Ma'ash discuss and give them their answers.
My show is Her Thoughts, which is a show featuring a rotating panel of female presenters discussing a range of topics from a female perspective.
Verses of Love aims to be the post-Majlis Majlis. It tries to bring the community together to continue engaging with the Masa'ib of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam.
I've had the honor of working and directing and producing documentaries for the Imam Hussein TV 3 channel.
So the late night show is essentially it's a talk show. I had guests all the way from self-development experts, media experts, sales directors.
My show, live in London, it needs no introduction, with world-renowned scholar Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani.
Sometimes it's difficult for us to do the research. It takes us sometimes a week, 2 weeks to find answers for certain questions. Sometimes the questions don't even get answered and we have to roll them on to next week. But I guess this is a problem that is actually, a good headache and worth having.
One of the main difficulties which we come across is getting female participants to participate on the show. After the show, when we get the emails coming through from the women in our society, in our community, and it really shows us that women relate more to a female speaker.
Among some of the difficulties, I'd say, is the late nights, with a pretty hectic schedule for all the reciters who have probably come from 1 or 2 majalis beforehand. Sometimes you just have this magical moment where the reciter says a line that connects and lets you release all of that emotion, which helps you connect with Abu Abdullah and therefore with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I filmed these documentaries during COVID. That always stays with me because I think that was a difficulty that I thought I will face, yet I think Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi opened so many doors and made everything so easy for me.
How much can we laugh and joke on an Islamic channel, especially when the channel is associated to Imam Hussein alayhi salam? But the best part of the show is actually, it's the fun part of it. So that's the games.
The best thing about this show, you can actually speak and discuss and actually voice their opinions and questions to Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshawani.
We've come so far, yet still have so much more to achieve. Support us so that we can support your children in bringing them more knowledge and content, because Imam Hussein TV is your gateway to Karbala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.